Dr. Malone, thank you so much for being with us again. It's been about 1 year since we sat down here at the farm to talk to you, and now unfortunately you are being attacked not just from the left but from the right as well. Could you just tell us what's going on?
Yeah, I can only speculate about what the agendas are. The issue is that there's a group of individuals that have all kind of fermented somehow on the Clay Clark tour, the Freedom Tour, and they've all kind of hung out with each other. And these include Stu Peters, Jane Ruby, the Bregans, Peter and Ginger, Peter McCullough, Judy Mikovits, all have kind of gotten themselves all wound up over a couple of really odd, obscure things, at least from my point of view. And they have amplified this in a variety of podcasts, and the Bregans, Peter Bregan seems to be on kind of a hate Robert Malone tour. He's gone through multiple podcasts where he just seems to have obsessed over me. The core issue seems to be that someone picked off from my CV, and the lesson learned here is I shouldn't be so open and transparent about everything. They grabbed a little phrase off of my CV that I had been serving on the active committee, ACTIV, of the NIH and Foundation for NIH. And this is the group that has many subgroups, one of which is involved currently in what used to be Operation Warp Speed and the development of mRNA vaccines. It didn't used to be involved in ACTIV, but it's kind of been rolled up. So ACTIV is operated by the Foundation for NIH, which is, I've objected to, spoken repeatedly suggesting that it needs to be dissolved. It's chartered by Congress, and it is the channel by which the Gates Foundation and the pharmaceutical industry can push money into NIH and influence what NIH does. It's ostensibly there to facilitate a public-private partnership, and I think it's a source of corruption, and it's corrupted much of what's happened with the drug repurposing effort. I was there at the behest of my client, who was a GS-14 level government employee working for a Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and I'm intentionally leaving his name off out of respect for his position. I was asked to mentor this gentleman, who I've known for years, by another GS-15, the next rank up, a brigadier general equivalent in the civilian corps, asked to mentor him at the beginning of this outbreak, and I did so, and we worked together through multiple projects focused on drug repurposing. And he asked me to serve as a volunteer non-voting member on this active clinical trials working group, which has nothing to do with vaccines. It was all about drugs and drug repurposing. And the reason for me being there was because we had been trying to get clinical trials started for the combination, testing the combination of famotidine, celecoxib, and ivermectin, these three repurposed drugs. The FDA blocked us from being able to do, this is the DOD, blocked the DOD from being able to do trials with ivermectin. I sat on the committee for a long time as an observer. They allowed me to speak. I was not allowed to vote on anything. I was there in support of Defense Threat Reduction Agency, Chem Biodefense Group, and I spoke about it on Rogan, and that raised concerns and objections, and shortly thereafter they reorganized ACTIV, and I was no longer invited to participate. So this whole storyline that I represent controlled opposition because I sat on the active committee is completely orthogonal to the facts. In fact, one of the things that I said was that the representative from Merck Incorporated that was on the committee actively tried to block the clinical trials of ivermectin that was run through the active clinical trials working group. So I don't get this, and it seems to be people seizing on one little fact, then they went to the webpage and they saw that Active was involved in mRNA vaccine development currently, because they're looking at it in the present, not in the past. This all happened in January, where it got reorganized, and drawing inferences about, and basically disparaging me and my professionalism, and drawing inferences based on a little tiny fact that they got, and they didn't even spend the time to comprehend what the Active structure was, and that there were many different branches in it, or bother to ask me. They just launched off on a massive conspiracy theory. The other one that seems to be in circulation, and I've had Stu Peters now accuse me of being a mass murderer, because I invented the platform mRNA delivery technology and its application for vaccines. And there's all of this that's been wound up. I've done probably hundreds of hours of podcasts discussing how I came to the invention, what I was doing, what I was trying to do. But apparently none of these people have listened to any of those, and they've just spun up a controversy as some way to attack me, that in some way I'm responsible for what's happened here, in contrast to the fact that I've been the one talking about what the problems are. Yeah. And so just to put that to rest, it was in the late 1980s, when I was about 28 years old, and it was a series of discoveries unexpected by me or anyone else. That's the way good discoveries are, that came out of my experiments trying to ask questions about how retroviral RNA gets packaged. And I happened to be working in a gene therapy lab, and it literally was the beginning of the creation, really the genesis of non-viral gene delivery. So I had, just like I wrote a Substack about this with the analogy to Oppenheimer, I had no idea that what I was working on and had come up with would in some way yield a product that was rushed through without adequate testing and resulted in probably millions of lives lost and huge amounts of damage all across the world. That I had nothing to do with building these vaccines. I created the technology platform and the 8 patents or 9 patents that are associated with it. What's odd about all this is that on the left and the corporate media, there's this huge effort of denialism that I did the work that I did when I did it. And they will never cite the patents, even though there's now 2 Nature papers out that show that my work was the first. Yeah. They always gloss over that as an effort to delegitimize me. And now coming from the right, I've got people attacking me, basically asserting that somehow I had some foresight 3 decades ago that what I was doing as a 28-year-old was going to result in this huge fiasco that I've now spent the last 2 years, clearly objecting to and trying to help everybody to become alerted and aware of what the problems are. So there's that one. And there's other versions. Another one of the attacks that's been mounted is that a vaccine that I worked on for a company called Reliance, which program I dropped off of, again, about January of this year, that somehow that's an mRNA vaccine that's being developed. And there are various people that have said, it's my vaccine. I own that vaccine, okay? So this is absolute crazy talk. It comes off of a slide deck that I presented for Reliance Vaccines, because I speak English well and can present well. Reliance is a company that has been formed from Reliance Industries, which is owned by Mukesh Ambani. Reliance Industries is one of the largest companies in the world. Mukesh Ambani is one of the richest men in the world. He is absolutely the richest man in India, last time I checked. And he chose, and they hired me as a consultant. He chose to build this vaccines company, largely out of his, they have kind of a requirement to sort of tithe to the poor. And so he's got over $1 billion in a fund. And he thought this was a good business opportunity, plus there was an unmet need for the poor in India and many emerging markets. And there's a growing groundswell of vaccine expertise in India as a core business. They're taking it away from the United States and Western Europe. And so he created this company, Reliance Vaccines, and in that process hired me to be a consultant basically on a weekly basis. I would dial in the middle of the night to a Zoom call with this team that was starting to form of expert vaccinologists in India. And at one point, as this whole thing developed, there was a corporate decision to try to build a low-cost, simple vaccine for the poor. And that simple vaccine had 2 antigens in it, neither of which are full-length spike. It's made, and you can see the slide deck that I talked about. One is manufactured in yeast, the other is manufactured in E. coli, old school technology, just the receptor binding domain of the spike, not the whole length spike with all the toxicity, in a nucleocapsid protein, which is something that should have been done with all these vaccines to broaden them. In India, unlike in the United States, the regulatory affairs team for the Indian government is not willing to allow any corners to be shortcut with vaccines, largely because of the problems they had with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation historically in India. And so they're very rigorous about it, and Reliance is slowly going through the process. And when I no longer became associated with this program, wherein I was basically mentoring and coaching the team on once a week, okay, had no financial stake in any of this, as a consultant, then my consultancy expired. It's a pain to set these things up with India because there's all kinds of documents having to do with the IRS and the Indian version of the IRS, and it's just a mountain of paperwork. So they didn't renew it. I have no idea where it's at right now. It has nothing to do with me. I don't own it. It is not an RNA vaccine. All of that is just plain conspiracy theory.
What kind of toll has this taken on you?
I'm so tired. I'm tearful. That's the truth. I had a long podcast last night with a gentleman from 9 to 10 last night. He's based in LA. It's taking a toll on my marriage. The just constantly being attacked. And from people that I thought were friends, colleagues. It's really discouraging. And frankly, I'm not enjoying this. We've now entered into a period where things are in transition. COVID is starting to die down. The truth is coming out and is starting to be acknowledged, like in this Politico piece. It's going to continue to kind of come out in a stepwise, gradualistic way because that's how these things get played. And there seems to be a sudden scramble for who gets credit for what and who's going to be the leader and who's going to be able to continue to capitalize on this and sell vitamins or whatever the thing is. And I never sought this role of being functionally a leader in this global resistance. It kind of came to me, and I've done my best to perform in responsibly and in a mature fashion. But I'm just tired of it. I just want to walk away.